Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast, where we will be discussing the concepts of health, wealth, leadership, and legacy. My name is Chad Hyams. I'll be your host, joined by my co-host, Bob Stewart. Bob, what's the word for today?
Chad, today's word is opportunity.
Oh, it's a good word, Bob. You always seem to come up with great words. I'm just going to start referring to you as Webster. All right. So in this conversation that we're going to have with Ben Kinney, he's going to share with us the story of his first investment in real estate, which is actually a lot more than just an investment. It was his first home in real estate. So we're going to hear a little bit more about that. Bob, as we jump into it, hearing from Ben, what should everybody really be listening to throughout?
I think in this discussion with him, the thing that I would have you pay attention to is there wasn't necessarily an obvious opportunity, right? He went a little bit extra and found the opportunity. Okay, so pay attention to how he finds that opportunity. I think it's a good lesson for all of us to not just be limited by what appear to be the options.
Okay, that's great. Make sure you listen. Bob just gave you that key thing to be looking for in the conversation. Let's jump in to our dialogue with Ben right now.
So you spent the last couple of years really diving into wealth building, investing, and just what to do with your money. And you've studied it. So what kind of investment? Like what kind of investments do you make?
I invest in a lot of things today, whether it's businesses, real estate, financial instruments, just putting cash on the side, valuable things like.
Where would you go first? Where did you go first?
My first investment?
Yeah.
My first investment was actually in real estate.
So your very first investment, and you didn't, why real estate at that? Maybe why today? Because maybe you didn't know then why you did it in real estate. Why real estate?
Real estate's an amazing tool. And a lot of people, Bob, will tell you that owning a home is not an investment. I don't believe that to be true. Owning a home that you plan to keep in perpetuity and rent out after you move out is for sure an investment. And it's one of the easiest ways to get started in investing. When you own a home, there's a variety of financial benefits. Number one is appreciation. The average home in America goes up 4% annually for the last 30 years across every area of the U.S. Nationwide average, 4%, which means if you owned a $300,000 home, every year it's going up the equivalent of 4%, which would be about $12,000. That's what it's worth more than what you paid for the year before. Now, there's always up years and down years and recessions and so on, but over a 30-year period, it looks like this. Now, the key is that you don't ever have to worry about making a bad investment today as long as you plan on keeping that property in perpetuity, because you aren't going to be dealing with the ups and the downs, right? Well, the second reason that you own real estate is for the principal reductions. When you are a renter, you're paying off your landlord's mortgage. One of my friends, he wrote a book about real estate. He said the fastest way to become a millionaire in real estate is to buy $1 million worth of real estate and let somebody else pay it off. And I've always laughed and smiled about that. But when you're a renter, you're doing that for your landlord. But when you own your own property, a portion of your mortgage every single month goes to paying down your principal. It's like a savings account, right? Because you now owe less than what your property is worth, and you put that money into that paying off that mortgage every single month. Well, the third benefit of owning real estate is the tax benefits. In the governments around the world, they incentivize people to be homeowners because they know that homeownership drives the economy, it drives neighborhoods, right? It improves neighborhoods, it improves schools, all those sort of things. So they want people to be homeowners. Therefore, they give tax incentives for homeownership. And you can take advantage of those once you buy your first property. And then the fourth benefit of homeownership is when you move out and you have somebody else move in and then they pay rent. As long as that rent is greater than what your mortgage payment is, you get that cash flow. And if you were to add up all three of those reasons, let's say you haven't moved out yet, right, but you get the tax benefits, the appreciation, and the principal reductions. On a regular $250,000 home across America, you're going to save and increase your net worth by about $20,000 to $25,000 annual. And that is massive when you look at what the average renter or what the average homeowner in America has in net worth. The biggest thing that contributes to somebody's wealth is home ownership.
And we all live somewhere, right? Like we've talked about this.
You got to live somewhere, so
Yeah.
you might as well make it an investment and a tool for yourself.
So you like you just came out of the womb and you knew all of these things about like real estate and the benefits of real estate investing? Or like, no, right? Obviously no. Was your first investment, I think, right, was a real estate investment. Not because of these reasons, right? Like you didn't intrinsically know these reasons. So why was that first? Like, tell me the story of that first investment for you.
Yeah. So I grew up in a poorer situation. I lived in a cabin with my father. It was about 300 square feet, and we rented it. We didn't even own that cabin. On the weekends, I went to my mom's house. We were in a single wide trailer in a small community, and we rented that piece of land that the trailer was on as well. And from travel trailers to single wides to cabins, home ownership was not something that I was made aware of from a familiar family point of view, right? And the idea that I could own a home or that I could own real estate never really crossed my mind. Early in my career, my first like professional real job, as I would call it, I was a cable guy. And I had to go out and fix somebody's cable one day. And I ran across this lady. Her name happened to be Paula, and Paula was a school teacher. And I went into this condo, townhouse looking thing, and I got talking to her. She was quite a kind woman and a great person. And she said, "Hey, I just bought this place." And I said, "Hey, congratulations, that's awesome." And I said, "It's a really nice condo." And she immediately corrected me, and she said, "It's not a condo." And I said, "Well, what is it?" She said, "It's a duplex." And I said, "What's the difference?" And she says, "Well, I own both sides. There was 2 units that were attached." And being younger, I was in my early 20s, I looked at her and naively I just said, "Why didn't you just buy a house?" Right? Not a great filter. And she said, "Because the renters next door, their rent covers 100% of my mortgage." And I sat back for a second, Bob, and I started thinking, and I wasn't a super bright kid, Chad, so I was just, you could see the wheels and the gears probably slowly cranking. I'm like,
Wait a minute.
hey, this chick lives for free. This lady lives for free. And I said, "Paula, you don't pay anything to live here." She's like, "I know, isn't that great?" And I'm like,
That's why I got all the cable channels. I got every one of them. HBO and
I'm
Showtime
like,
and everything.
I want to do that. And I was driving away in my little crappy cable truck, and I was thinking to myself, I'm going to do that. So I went and I stopped by this mortgage place, and the mortgage guy said, "Yeah, you could buy one of those, but you need $11,500 saved up." I didn't have $11,500 saved up, but I had some things I could sell, and I set off with a plan that I would save up that much money, and I did. I saved up $11,500.
How long did it take you?
I think it was about 6 months. Selling some stuff. I had a little bit to start with, but I went and I figured it out, right? And I lived in a $800 a month apartment, and so I didn't have a lot of expenses. Well, the next thing I did is I went and I found a real estate agent. And I didn't find a great real estate agent, but I found a real estate agent. And this
Those are out there.
And this real estate agent, he said, "Yeah, I'd love to help you." And very nice guy, by the way. And he drove me around and he showed me houses and he showed me condos. And I remember going to this one condo and I said, do I get the other side too? And he said, "No, this is just one of them." And I'm like, "You have to understand, I'm in it for this free thing. Like, I want 2 where one pays for the other," right? And there just wasn't a lot on the market during that time. And if it was over my price range. I was approved for $230,000. And nothing was coming in on that range. And he kept showing me things. I think he was getting frustrated with me, and I was getting frustrated with him. And so one day I started driving around, and I just started writing down the addresses of all the different duplexes that I had thought looked good and that looked like a place that I would want to live in.
You got a little bit. You were a cable guy, so you were familiar with the streets, and you'd been out around those places.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I literally just wrote down their addresses, and I went back to my computer, and I looked up each address in the county assessor's page, and I saw who bought them, When did they pay for it? What did they pay for it? Did it have, how many bedrooms did it have? And I really wanted one that had 3 bedrooms on each side because you could get a lot more for rents than a 2-bedroom. And I noticed one thing about a duplex. It wasn't one that I ended up buying, but I noticed is that some duplexes had a tax forwarding address outside of the state. I thought, these people own this, but they don't actually live here. They may not know what's going on in this real estate market, or they may have moved away. They don't really care about this anymore. I'm going to reach out to them. So I ended up calling one, and I said, hey, my name is Ben, and I would like to buy your duplex. And the guy said, well, it's funny you say that because we were thinking about potentially selling. And I said, okay. And I hung up the phone. I'm like, I'll call you back. So I hung up the phone, and I called my real estate agent, and I said, hey, shitty real estate agent, I have this property I want to buy. I found it. Will you call and you offer him this? And the guy said, he'll never sell for that. I said, all right. And I hung up the phone, and I thought to myself, well, how does he know? He didn't even ask him, right? So I only knew one other real estate agent, and she lived about 4 counties or 3 counties south of me in Everett, Washington. And I called her up. Her name's Catherine. We worked together today. And I said, Catherine, I found a duplex I want to buy. It's not on the market. I have the guy's contact information. He's already says that he's willing to sell. Will you call and will you offer him $227,000 for the duplex? She said, why 227? I said, because I'm only approved to 230, and it'll give me some negotiation room, right? So she did, and this gentleman agreed to pay her commission and agreed to my price at $227,500 with no counter. So I bought that duplex, Bob, and I remember moving in, and I didn't quite accomplish my goal of the neighbors paying for the duplex of my mortgage, because the one side paid $1,200 a month for a 3-bedroom, and my mortgage was $1,210. So I missed it, but I got to live for $10 a month, which entirely made up for it because I found out that the neighbors were a bunch of college girls. I was pretty young at that age, and that was
21.
That was worth $10 right there, having college girls as neighbors. And well, that was my first investment, Bob. Was that? And even though it didn't cash flow right away because I lived in one side and rented out the other, I didn't pay anything to live, and I was used to paying that $800 or $1,000 a month for rent.
That was extra cash.
So I got to put that into my savings account. And at the end of the year, I had saved up another $12,000 that I could have used for something else, right? And I ended up eventually renting out rooms in the duplex because I didn't need all 3, and I charged them a little bit of money, and ended up cash flowing right away. And that became my very first investment, the duplex, which, by the way, I still own today.
I was just about to ask, how long ago is this story? How many years ago were you buying this duplex?
I think it was in like 2003 or 2004.
And it was before you were in real estate, because we know that you have a real estate industry that you're in. So before you were in it, were able to do all that research that's available to anybody. They could go out there and they could do that. They could find a shitty realtor like you did, or they could find a great realtor that'll take care of them.
Yeah.
They could create these opportunities, and you've now had this property for 15 plus years.
Yeah. It's nearly paid down at over half, and it's probably worth $450,000 to $500,000 today.
So it's doubled in value.
I paid off half of it.
Paid off half of it.
Yeah.
So you've made a huge profit on this and still own it. So you're going to still have the renters continue to pay it down, while the appreciation that you talked about before will continue to raise its value over the years.
And rents have gone up dramatically. I think we get $1,800 to $2,000 aside now for that duplex. So we bring in $3,800 a month, and the mortgage is still
if you were
$1,210.
If you were just an average person, just sitting on your couch watching HGTV, or I think a lot of people think, the money to be made in real estate is in these flippers, right? These shows come in, they show I buy it at the auction for $150, and I put $30,000 in, and I sell it for $240, and I made $60,000, right? And people's eyes like roll at these numbers, but you don't sell real estate, right? Like you sell real estate, but you don't sell your real estate.
Yeah.
Why? Like why have you become this person that just holds real estate?
I don't know if your guys' parents were like this, but I remember riding around with my dad, and my dad saying when I was young, I could have bought that when 20 years ago,
My
right?
dad did.
Yeah. And I think about that today, right? There isn't a property out there that I could have rode around with my dad 30 years ago that it wouldn't have been a good deal to buy that 30 years ago and still own it today, right? All there is stories from people that said, I used to own that. If I still owned that, things would be a lot different today, right?
Sure.
Or I could have bought that if I would have bought that then, right? Wealth is built by keeping real estate, by paying it off, by using the cash flow to grow and do more things. Flippers are basically working at a job called flipping homes, and they're making income. But I'm not looking for income. I have income from my job. I'm looking to build wealth, and you build wealth by keeping real estate.
What do you do with that extra money that's coming in? I want to go back to that. You were saying you're bringing in about $3,600 on this duplex. You said your mortgage is about $1,200 on it. There's a difference. Are you throwing all that money at the property to get it down so that mortgage goes away? Are you taking that money and putting it into other investments? Are you just taking that money and putting it, what are you doing with that cash flow?
So what I've done since the very beginning, Chad, is I created a separate bank account for that property, and I'd put the rents in there. And I even paid myself rent in the beginning so that account would build up. But let's say that we didn't. We were just putting all the rents in there. I would keep that money in that account until it had covered 3 to 6 months of not having a tenant in that property. Because what if somebody left? Now, I've never had a vacant property for more than a couple weeks in my entire career of owning real estate. That's usually
Buy near a college, right? I mean, a lot of your stuff is here around the college, right?
Right, yeah. So I've never had to use that, but I've had hot water tanks that broke or a washer that broke or just little things like that, right? So I build up a reserve account. And then after that, every additional dollar I use to either pay the mortgage down quicker or I put it into my real estate investing account that I use to buy the next property. Maybe someday we'll talk about the second property I bought. That initial duplex set me up for everything that I have today because it got me excited about owning real estate. The real estate market started to go up pretty quickly. So I started seeing also that I had equity, and equity is net worth, right? I got to see that a guy that had never owned anything, that didn't have any savings, that a couple of years later I had $100,000 in equity, right? $100,000 in net worth because the property had gone up in value. And I hadn't done anything for that. I was literally making 25 grand a year just owning something that prior I was paying a landlord. Imagine what would happen if I would have done that a couple years earlier, right? Or a couple more times.
You talk about this, like you put $12,000 down that first property, and you bought it at, say, $230, and if it appreciated at that annual appreciation rate, it, like in the first year, it had $10,000 of appreciation. Can you talk about that concept of appreciation on just your down payment versus like putting that money into the stock market? You know what I'm talking about? Like, you talk often about this idea of
I didn't think there was math on this podcast.
Yes, yeah.
But the leverage, right? It's it's a small down payment that you get appreciation against the whole value of that thing.
If you were to put $10,000 into the stock market, like you put it into your 401k or your retirement account, and the stock market went up, an amazing return like on the S&P 500 might be, or your 401k or something, might be like 11% or 13%, which means you would make 11% of the $10,000 you have in your retirement account. You make $1,100, right, that year, and that would have been considered a good year in the stock market. Mm-hmm. Well, that same $10,000 that you would invest in your first piece of real estate, you don't make appreciation 4% or 6% or whatever appreciation is locally on the amount you put down. You make appreciation on the price that you paid for the property or on its original value. So in my situation, I put $11,500 down or $12,500, whatever it was, and I made 4% or 6% or 8%, right, on $230,000. Not on the $12,000 I put down. So every year, it was like I was getting 100% or 200% return on my original $11,500 $500.
So if you did the FHA loan at 3.5%, or even a conventional, you put 20% or 10%, wherever you were at, you then got appreciation on all that other 80% of the bank's money.
That's
essentially, right?
That's right. That's why home ownership is so important, is specifically buying owner-occupied homes that you move into is so important, because you can buy them for 3% or 5% down. Whereas if I was to go buy a duplex back then that I wasn't going to live in, I would have had to put 20 or 25% down for an investment property, a non-owner occupied home. Well, I was a cable guy. So saving up 20% or 25% of a $230,000 property, I may have never saved it up, right? Or it would have took me 3 to 5 years to have enough money to do that. But I was able to get into home ownership and get into real estate investing by buying owner occupied, putting that 3 to 5% down, right? And then over time I rented it out, and the next property I bought wasn't an investment property, it was an owner occupied, and I moved in to that next house. And we'll talk about that concept of how to do that maybe on a different call.
And you didn't know this stuff. Again, like we were talking about, you weren't born with this knowledge. You went to someone to get the mortgage that helped answer those questions for you. You went to more than one realtor who gave you the answers, that you have now learned these things about the different kinds of loans and the different amounts you had to save to be able to figure out how to make that work.
I bought the Landlord for Dummies book. Literally, I still have it. It's in our bookcase out there, the yellow one, for dummies, right? And I bought the rental properties for dummies book. And I just sat down and I grinded myself away through learning about these things. Because I realized that there was nobody coming to save us. That I wasn't taught about money in college. I wasn't taught about wealth building or owning real estate in high school. My parents didn't have money conversations while we're at the dinner table. That didn't exist. If I want to be in that sort of conversation, I have to go seek it out, or I have to go buy these books or listen to these podcasts and find that information.
Is that part of what drives you to take this message and get it out there? Is this idea that you feel like, in some way, I feel robbed of having had somebody teach me this stuff, like when I was 20, right? And could have actually done something with it. Does that drive you at all? This idea that you maybe felt like, where was this information for me?
Yeah, we own and operate a lot of companies, software, brokerage, real estate sales, training, coaching, mortgage, title, all those sort of stuff. But for one reason, I believe that home ownership is one of the most important things that you can do to protect your family, to build wealth, and to take care of your retirement and your future. In fact, we made the mission statement of our company delivering the dream of home ownership everywhere, because I want to get the message out. Now, not just to our customers, right, but to our employees. I'm always walking around saying, hey, when are you going to buy a place? Are you going to buy an investment property? Right? Don't buy a boat or a ski-doo, right? Don't go and do these things that lose value. Go make some investments so that the rest of your life, the rest of your trajectory changes. Be willing to have a little less. And my very first hire and partner now, Jolene did this very well. She went and bought her very first house, and she wasn't a duplex, but she rented out each and every room in that house to help pay for her mortgage. And she rented out to her friends or people that she would find, but she was able to live for free by renting out the bedrooms in her home. She found a way to make home ownership work for her. So people listening to this, they might say, well, I couldn't afford it or whatever. Get a roommate.
Or two.
Or in Jolene's situation, I think she had 3 or 4 at one time. Just find a way, right? Well, Chad asked me what my wrist says, this little band on my wrist. It says, whatever it takes. You want to change your trajectory, be willing to do whatever it takes. And one way to do that is to focus on your wealth. Making more money, building wealth, buying real estate.
He does it again, right? Ben Kinney does it again, and we all want to continuously be amazed, but he's not doing anything really special, is he, Bob?
No. It's not like anybody couldn't do these things, right? But I think if you were to look at his scenario, what 99 out of 100 of us would do is we would go out there on the internet or wherever and we'd say, who's actively selling their property? What homes are listed in Bellingham that are a duplex that meet that criteria? And then if there was none, Which is essentially what his real estate agent did, right? There were none. And then we would just walk away, or we'd say, oh, we got to wait for that perfect opportunity to present itself to us.
Right.
And he just said, no, I'm going to go manufacture that opportunity, right? So, I mean, like, how many times in your life, in your day-to-day, are you just met with like there's not an obvious answer here, right? And you just go, well, I can't do that. And he just said, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to find a way to do it. So he's manufactured opportunity there. That's just, to me, is, anybody could have done that, right? But it's kind of like this, wow, he does it. And throughout his career, you see him, and I think there's more of this that we'll hear, right? These manufactured opportunities where other people might not have seen it.
That's an amazing point you're bringing up, Bob. Here Ben's talking about investing. Here Ben's talking about living for free. Here Ben's talking about creating future wealth. Yet what you're finding in that message, even though that's what it's disguised being talking about, what you're finding in that message is go create opportunity for yourself each and every day, no matter where it is.
Yeah, and I think a lot, there's these dead ends, there's nothing there. And he just looks at things a slightly different way. He basically says, I'm going to achieve this thing. I was going to figure out how, right? And most of us would say, I tried, and the normal way that you would do that, there was no opportunity there. And he just said, no, I'm going to find it one way or another.
Great message that he shares with us. Great way to you pull that message out and reinterpret it for everybody as well. So, wherever you're watching podcasts, listening to podcasts, make sure you subscribe to the Win, Make, Give podcast. As I said, if you're watching them, that's true. We are on YouTube. Just go to winmakegive.com, find the link. You can watch any of these podcasts that are out there. Share them. Put them out there. Let us hear what you're thinking about these conversations. Until our next one, we'll see you later.